Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. If more people trickle in, that'll be great. First things up, could I get a designated note taker for today?
I can do it.
Oh, thank you. I don't see any new faces, so I think we can skip over that. And we go right into outstanding RFCs. First thing up is this decoupled dependencies Buildpack RFC. I don't know. I just need to really corner down some time to work on this. My hope is for some time either later this week or next week. I think I have an idea of a plan of attack on sort of how to move forward on this. But you know, it's just a little slow. Next up, we have the proposal for the introduce the new crawl VM. I think that Anthony is reaching out to somebody who's part of the CFF to talk legal about this, to discuss like what's actually okay for us to distribute license wise. So I think that there is progress being made on this, but I don't have any really updates beyond that. And then Jericho, is there anything that you would like to discuss as part of this proposed multi-arch build pack?
No updates right now.
Cool. In that case, unless someone wants to discuss any of these RFCs, we can move on. Great. Next up, we have CNB updates and questions. I think the only interesting update, Jericho, was that the manifest stuff was moved into the manifest work for PAC was moved into like voted for, or like they're ready to move on it, if I recall correctly. I don't know the exact phrasing on that. Like I didn't know exactly what they said, like whether or not it was moved to like ready for votes, or if they were like it has all of the votes that it needs because it doesn't need to have like a committee approval because it doesn't need to be part of an RFC or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yep. Yeah, I think that's just waiting to get, I think possibly a couple of more unit tests, but it's basically ready to be merged. And there's a lot of discussion now that it's ready to be merged where people are trying to change it, which is good. But I think this is like experimental version 1 kind of like effort. And then once it gets merged, it may not stay that way. It's going to be experimental. So we'll see.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think ready to merge. I like that, Rob. Just ship it.
The only other thing of interest that I could think of is they didn't discuss it last week, but there was some discussion around pack flatten, like reworking how that works to allow for multiple different layer collections. And if that's something that you have like an interest in, it would be worth looking at. They were really discussing it in the context of builders. But I didn't have a bunch to add in that particular meeting because any flattening that's happening, it's not happening for builders right now. But yeah, and if you are using pack flatten, that's something to check out.
I have not used it yet, but that is good to know.
Those are the only two CMB updates I can think of. Next up we have a project update.
Yeah, On the stack side of the house, we removed the YJ tool from the build images of the stacks. It was an RFC that was like approved a while back and pretty low priority, so we never got to it. And then it started showing up in CVE scanners because it was built with older versions of Golang libraries. And I was like, instead of updating this, why don't we just implement the RFC and remove it? So that's gone. RFC's implemented. Like, hopefully none of you ever notice this and you get like 12 megabytes back on your stack image.
It's 12 megabytes.
I don't know. Seems like what a Golang program is, right? I didn't really measure it. I can check.
Sound entirely wrong. Awesome. Thank you. Any other project updates that people have?
I've successfully built my first working Java app with prototypes of the Java extension and Buildpack this morning, which is just a small thing. So hopefully that'll be rolling through soon. I've had a lot of fun digging into how stuff couldn't work because extensions aren't allowed to write layers directories. And all of the Java build packs today, once they've installed the JVM, configure it by writing layers that create environment variables that configure the JVM when it's at runtime. So I had to split that behavior into a Java extension and a Java helper build pack. And the helper build pack creates the layers and the extension just provides the install. And start running into trouble as I'm setting these environment variables up because I'm looking at some of them going, but I can't guarantee that these values will be the same for things like Java Home. Because Java Home is obviously in the builder image, I've installed Java using DNF. And in the run image, which I'm going to switch to, Java's already baked into the image. So Java Home could be different in the run image to it is in the build image. I mean, it's not, thankfully. I'm really thankful for that. But, there's some issues here about the way that historically, because it was all put into a layer, you could guarantee it would be in exactly the same place during build time and runtime, and you could configure things about that. And some of those assumptions start to break when you look at how UBI stacks are going to work with, allowing the system to install certain things as packages means they'll be in one place during build and could be in another during a run image. The biggest one that I've run into, though, is CA certificates. And I was just having a chat with Daniel about that because the CA certificate processing that's in Paketo at the moment is UBI, is Ubuntu centric. Sorry, too many UB beginning words there. It's Ubuntu centric because it's looking for the files at the locations where they're present in Ubuntu. Things like etc, SSL certs, and then I think it's CA certificates.crt or something like that. Anyway, the file names for the trust store is different in a UBI image than it is to a UBI image. So the default CA certificate build pack won't do its job correctly. And thankfully it fails politely and doesn't get in the way, but it's these little differences that are starting to come out as I'm playing around. So there's some other ones that were happening with key store trust stores as well. Like if your key store trust store is part of your JVM that's in a layer, of course you can read write to it. But if that key store trust store is part of the system JVM, then you're probably not allowed to read write to it unless you've got high levels of privilege, which you don't have. So there's a lot of fun to be worked out. I think we're looking at possibly just pushing out the first release of this so that you can't really do custom certificates in the same way, and we'll just say, hey, it works for most stuff. Just don't use custom certificates for a while, and we'll figure those out. Worst case, we'll have to create another extension, and we put the extension in before all of the other UBI extensions, and that one will be like the CA certificates build pack that runs before all the other build packs, and that extension will just pre-populate the CA certificates correctly, and the other extensions can then use it and configure them. Does that sound reasonable? The other bit we were wondering from Michael and I's point of view is there any benefit or should we be looking at us becoming maintainers of some of the UBI stuff at some point? Because we're raising a lot of this through, and I think we're of the opinion at the moment that whilst we're putting it through, it makes sense not to be a maintainer on it, because that means that we are guaranteeing that other people are looking at this code before it's being contributed and accepted into Paketo, which I understand that makes a lot of sense for. But then as we start to move forwards from there and we get all the little maintenance PRs start ticking up for, hey, automatically update this, it would be great if we could action those and get those done and keep the stacks up to date and keep them rolling once things have settled a bit. Is there a process for applying to become a maintainer on projects, or is this something that, how's that work?
So currently the only granular level that we have for maintainership, it would be like a language level maintainer, but I don't think that necessarily makes as much sense. It might make sense for us to introduce a new maintainer team that would be something along the lines of UBI maintainers. And then just like we could have both. We could either transfer maintenance ownership over to just be purely UBI, or we could sort of double up the maintenance or maintainer group. So like the Java extensions would be both UBI and Java, and then stacks. The stack would be stacks and UBI. Just if we wanted to do that, or we could give sole maintainership power or whatever that might be. I'm not opposed to the idea of creating a new UBI maintainer group, and I think that the process would be pretty straightforward. You would probably basically say like, hey, so if you look at the commit history of all of the UBI work, you'll notice that it's all of our users who've done it. So it might make sense for us to maintain it, at which point I don't know that I could argue outside of that.
Okay.
I don't know that we have an official like an official way of electing that a new group, like we've kind of just done it arbitrarily, like creating a new group and then adding maintainers to that group. So I would probably need to consult, like I would probably need to get a super majority of steering committee members to do that. So I can't promise anything because none of the other steering committees are here. Members are here.
Agreed. But... I mean, there's very few of us on this call compared to the size of the number of people who are actually in the maintainers groups that I imagine would have to be in agreement with this. Because so yeah, I mean that sounds great from my perspective. I totally get it. So if you want to start asking people and see how they respond to that sort of idea, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna add. First, I had the same instinct as you, which is good, right? Like I think having a separate maintainer group, I have like two kind of thoughts, right? Firstly, and I'll do the second one first. So the second one is like the process of like creating new maintainer groups has been sort of ad hoc so far. I think this is a good forcing function to actually encode a process, because like Ozzy, your assumption is that it needs some sort of like approval by the existing majority of like the existing maintainers. But like I didn't have that assumption. I was assuming Fars and like the steering committee would just like YOLO it, right? So like I think that should be codified, because like clearly we have different expectations there. So maybe this is a good opportunity to kind of like actually create a process and have it like enshrined in the whatever, however that works. I don't know how meta processes work. Secondly, I think there's an interesting question here, right? Which is like the maintainer groups, the way that we viewed them, especially with respect to like the GitHub permissions, is they're very much like a, what's the term? Like a disjointed set, right? Like each repo is owned by one maintainer group, and one maintainer group has like the sole responsibility of that repository. But UBI is like a cross-cutting concern, right? Like it cuts across like stacks, builders, extensions, Buildpacks, right? So I think, not to like, make this too complicated, but I do think this is like the first time we've come across a situation where you want the UBI experienced like folks to weigh in on UBI issues, but not necessarily own every aspect of a build pack that doesn't impact UBI, but at the same time, they should be the code maintainers of certain repos. So I think that might require a little bit more thought than we've had to do so far. So those are like my two kind of like things for the steering committee to think about.
I think this isn't necessarily the first time that we've had individuals own certain parts of a single code base. So like in a lot of our content repos, we have like the individual maintainer groups owning the sub repositories of or the sub folders. I don't know what you call that. The subgroups of that, but like, yeah, having two basically full owner groups on a particular repository, I don't know that we've done, but I also don't know that it's like particularly like a significantly more dramatic workflow, because all I would say is just like this repo is owned by this group, and that's just like the situation with it. I don't know how that would work with something like code owners. I'd have to like, if you can just put both in as like code owners, and if one of those approves as a code owner, that's fine. But that's also just like, I don't know, kind of a whatever logistical question.
Yeah, sorry, I can't multitask, so I'm trying to take notes and internalize what you're saying at the same time. Yeah, I don't want to overcomplicate this either. Like, I think it'll be fine. I just think it's like
it's something we have to like actually like think a little bit about, as opposed to just kind of doing. Yeah,
that was my point. And sorry,
yeah,
Ozzy, go ahead.
That was my intent here anyway. Was just to raise it as a thing so that we can get the ball rolling and start seeing where it ends up.
Yeah, okay. And so it sounds like what we want to do is we want to have some sort of like some sort of formal write-up. I guess I have to make an RFC to talk about how you add or create a new maintainer group, and like out of whole cloth that manages like already managed repos, like it's an additional group. All right. Okay. I'll reach out to the other folks on the steering committee, and maybe I'll just put together an RFC. Maybe that's the easier idea. Okay. Is there any other discussion that people would like to have?
I wanted to just bring something up quickly. So I haven't looked at the decoupled dependencies RFC yet, but I have been looking at like building ARM versions of Buildpacks, Paketo Buildpacks, and I'm noticing that some of them use libpack and some of them use packet. Is that being addressed to be a unified way to move forward in the decoupled dependencies RFC? Is that part of the plan, or is that not part of the plan? I'm just curious.
So, I mean, the way that I think that the goal is that ultimately they will function the same, and hopefully, like, we will reach a consensus on like how we move forward with managing metadata and dependencies in that sort of way. Right now it's like a little too nebulous to even sort of talk about what the solution that we picked is, because we haven't really picked a solution. But I think that like I guess like my question is like, is your concern that like the way that we handle metadata will diverge between the two types of build pack, therefore like making it hard to like manage? Because in my head, like what I'm curious about is like, at the end of the day, the build pack will ultimately be responsible for like looking at the like architecture it's running on and downloading the correct like the correct artifact based on like the metadata that's attached to that. So that should be a decision that's like wholly contained within inside the build pack. I don't think that like any third party will have to do that. So I guess like I'm not sure that I understand the like concern about whether or not they like diverge as long as they get the same dependent or the correct dependency.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, the thing I'm doing right now is like if you looked at Daniel's work, and then Deshaun Carter did some stuff where he's basically like forking a bunch of Paketo build packs and then rebuilding them as ARM. That works well if they're all using the same library, if it's all libpack or if it's all packet. But when you start having a mix, it becomes muddy. And you know, like I've just noticed that like I think packet uses like SHA 256, and then Libpack uses 250 SHA-256, and then Packet uses checksum with like the hash algorithm as the first part of the string with a colon, blah blah blah. So, anyways, I'm just seeing these kind of like little nuance differences, and like I'm trying to tackle them myself. Like this isn't really something Paketo's doing, but like as I look at this problem, I'm like, all right, is this something that we should consider? Like I'm not trying to say one should be used, but when it comes time to kind of like do the multi-arch stuff, we should make it as easy as possible to have the same, to have consistency across all of them, so that hopefully we only have like one code base that we have to, or one piece of code that we have to maintain to manage all of that stuff.
Yeah. That
just as something
that makes a lot more sense. Yeah. The part of the discussion that we're having is like, yes, I think that we do want to standardize around a particular metadata format. So like metadata would look uniform across the various build packs. I think that that's something that we're looking into. And like we've kind of like agreed on what that should sort of look like. It's just sort of how we present the metadata package at this point that we're like literally what the structure of the metadata package is at this point that we're still not arguing over, but like trying to hash out. But yeah, that's like, yes, aligning on what the like build pack, for lack of a better word, build pack TOML format is, or like in specifically the dependencies. That is like, I think something that we are definitely trying to hone in on.
Okay, so just another reason for me to read that RFC. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've been hit by the libpack packet stuff a lot, because Packet managed to get extension support written first, but then I had to write the same thing all the way through for libpack and libjvm and pipeline builder. It goes beyond libpack and Packet. Is the thing, is that libpack and Packet are the beginning of the fork, and then there are ecosystems that are built off of those. So shifting them is more than just rewriting the occasional thing to use a different API. It involves changing the entire way that certain stacks are built, because pipeline builder, which rests on top of libpack, which rests on top of libcmb, is used to generate the GitHub workflows for projects that are using libpack. So, which are different to the workflows that are generated for the packet-based projects.
There is, it's something that a mantle we picked up and then had to put down because we had to pick up other workflows, but like definitely trying to converge our code bases slowly is like a goal, like between Packet and libpack. I know that one of the big things that we wanted to do initially was there's like a sort of alpha version of libcmb 1.0 that like part of the goal is to rewrite both libraries and a lot of build packs to be based on that version of libcmb and only use like Packet and libpack as like effectively like utility libraries on top of that. So it's like stuff to download things, stuff to do.
And that's libpack v2 is sitting on top of libcmb v2. There's some confusing parts where libcmb is doing its v2 development in its main branch, which can be confusing. But libcmb is now a proper Go v2 module, and has updated, so it supports the newer versions of the spec and all that kind of stuff. Libpack has a v2 module that's built on libcmb's v2. libjvm has a v2 module built on top of libpack. Pipeline builder is built on top of libpack v2 now as well. Basically, there's a whole v2 ecosystem that I've been generously helping create over the last month or so, just trying to get everything to the point where we can build things with extensions and stuff. So
yeah, and it would probably be worth a team that works on Packet to take some time to do a conversion over and see what the pain is for that and talk about doing migration. It's just a little difficult. Some, like with just like the amount of time that we can like dedicate to that right now, unfortunately. So yeah, well, I would love to take a look at that because it's a personal goal of mine, but like see what we can get to.
Yeah, I feel like we need like sabbaticals, like you get in academia, right? You get like 9 months every 5 years to just do something, write a book, whatever. I was just going to add, like, obviously everyone said is accurate. In addition, I think it's a lot easier for us to start with the CI side of the house, right? Like it's a lot easier for us to merge or bridge or whatever word you want to use the workflows like first, and that is like an active goal. Like we are, I should say, we are actively working on that, right? Like the packet libpack thing is like orders of magnitude harder than kind of switching out how workflows get copied or generated. There's obviously like I understand that like the pipeline builder like builds workflows based on libpack and like I get that, but like at the end of the day, it's a YAML file, right? And it's way easier to swap out a YAML file than it is to like rewrite a bunch of code that's expecting an API. And so we are like maybe this is like oversharing, but like on the kind of commercial VMware side of the house, we have like been poking around at this with some of the like bridging some of the workflows that we use on like commercial like versions of the Paketo Buildpacks, and we've had some success, and it's like it's tractable. So I'm optimistic that that will be something we can keep chipping away at on the Paketo side.
I mean, pipeline builder, I've worked a lot on that recently, getting it to generate pipelines for stuff. And I think its approach is quite simple, that you start with a YAML file as a descriptor and it generates all the rest of the workflows from there and keeps them up to date as time rolls forwards as well, which I thought was quite cute. And I think when I started looking at the non-pipeline builder-based projects, they all sort of come from a mother repository that has copies of them, but they've all been hand tweaked from there on in their destination location, or at least they have been. I've encountered ones where they've deviated from the parents, and there's no script that keeps the child repositories up to date with changes that are made in the parents. And if you realize there's a bug in your create package logic in a non-libpack based thing, then you have to propagate that manually out to all of the other places. Or at least that's what I'd found when I was digging. Is that not right?
Yeah, I'm squinting because that's like generally not my experience as someone who's
Okay.
spent a large part of my life over the last month working on these workflows. Also, I can think of a couple of examples where there are within the repositories that I personally maintain, right? And maybe you're referring things like the UBI extensions, which I know are like deviating, and that's like a whole separate
they're
thing.
way off track at this point. Yeah.
But in terms of like sort of the I don't know how else to phrase this, the repos that existed 4 months ago, right? There's very, very few examples where we had to manually tweak a shared workflow and then it gets stale. And in fact, one of the things we've been doing over the last few months is actually like tracking those down and like making them compatible again. In general, each of the repositories will have a workflow that's called like update GitHub config, and that will run daily, perhaps even more frequently than daily in some cases, and it will essentially rsync over the relevant files from the GitHub config mother repository, to use your word. Currently, we don't do any pre or post processing. The files are just straight copied. That may have to change over time. We may have to do some like YAML manipulation, in which case there's an interesting debate about like, should we use pipeline builder's approach of like a more codified but like heavyweight solution, or should we use like YAML based like tools like YTT or something? But we're not there yet. But yeah, if you like maybe taking it back to the beginning, if you find a repository that is out of sync, like at the very least raise an issue and tag the tooling maintainers, because my expectation, my understanding is, again, with the exception of the UBI extensions, because those are kind of under construction, and the UBI builders and stuff, like everything else should be like actively being synced.
I have one just follow up on the dependency, and this is probably answered in decoupled dependencies, but I've noticed that the way you decide what dependency you're trying to use, like that logic kind of lives in different places depending on the build pack you're using. Some of them have a dependency folder with some, I think it's retrieve or some kind of folder where it's like making an API call to, the download release, and then from there figuring stuff out. But my question is there going to be a standard kind of like interface or something planned for the decoupled dependencies where everybody's going to implement something, and you just have to implement that, and then the tooling will just generally work? I mean, this is ideal, obviously, happy path, but is that generally the plan?
So I can't personally speak to what like Java and Libpack does, but those dependency folders that you see are the standardized interface that at least all of the packet library build packs have for doing dependency management. At one point, we had one sort of large managed system that did all of the checks and then like basically pushed all of the dependencies to the various build packs, and then oh gosh, like 6 to 9 months ago, we switched over to a completely decentralized dependency management system. So like all of the build packs independently now like have the logic to like go to the source where they can see if they have the correct build pack version, either fetch like the new artifacts they need, or like fetch the artifact, build it, and then put it on like a hosted bucket, and then update all of the dependencies from there. So that's the interface. I don't know what I don't know what is happening in Libpack. It's unfortunate that Anthony wasn't able to make it here, because I think he would probably be able to answer that a bit more succinctly. But yeah, I don't personally know what's happening on that front, but the like dependency retrieval compilation, like that, the dependency folder with like the retrieval folder, and then like or file, and then the compilation, that is the sort of interface that was set up. And I think that there's like a whole series of RFCs, like a flight of RFCs that lay out that workflow.
Okay, yeah, I remember the decoupled dependencies thing previously, right? You had like a previous one where you did something like this.
Yeah, this
Not,
is
not the one you're working on now, the previous one.
Sort of decentralizing the dependencies.
Yeah.
I can only speak briefly to Libpack's dependency stuff, but they do have a dependency cache resolver, 2 separate objects that have a nice API that abstract away all of the stuff about how the dependencies are located and found, and whatever you're going to do with them. So it's not too bad.
Yeah, it's I think it's something similar, but maybe less sort of singular in the case for my brain just completely died. In the case of Packet, it's sort of driven by like a series of make files where like you can say like make retrieve, and then you hand it like it hands out some file, and if you have to like do compilation, it knows by like, oh, this file is configured this way, so we need to then go to the compilation section and run this standardized set of compilation stuff.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll keep bubbling things up as we're doing some kind of like testing, but it sounds like a lot of this stuff has been considered or thought through already, and it's just a matter of like me learning how it works with either Packet or Libpack, and then going from there. So this is good. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you. A lot of learning here today.
Real office hours.
It's been very useful. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions, like any other open mic questions or discussion topics that people have? I do. I have one more call out for UBI extensions. This is just like an aside. There's going to be an issue with doing automatic the automatic bumping of the build packs or the extensions inside of the builders, because Jam, the tool that we use that like goes out and like does the formatting for that, currently just doesn't know that extensions exist because they're in their own subcategory. There's an issue filed for that, and I think it's a pretty straightforward like addition. Like all of the logic for how to do it with build packs, I think will just be identical for extensions, because they're basically the same artifact and the same thing. They just literally need to be added to the consideration. There's an issue drawn up on that. I haven't personally had any time to like go in and make that change. Maybe it's something I try and do this Friday or something like that when I have a little bit of extra time to.
Yeah, if it still needs doing, let me know. I could probably get on to looking at that. I've had a brief look at Jam and I realised it didn't have extension support. I mean, there's the alternative, right, which we just flip the projects that were using Jam to use Pipeline Builder instead, and then it doesn't need to worry anymore.
I don't know that there's any. I don't know that there's any support. I like Jam as is the tool that we have for doing like builders and like all of the builders like for that.
So
But
Pipeline Builder can build builders. It can build every
Ooh.
single type of project. It's only being used for a few today. So I know because I've had to write all the support and upgrade it all to support extensions all the way through. So I mean, it'll build extensions, it'll build build packs, it'll build builders, it'll build stacks. It'll depending on what you set in the descriptor type.
Ozzy, maybe it would be useful for you to just take a repo and try and run Pipeline Builder against it, because my mental model is that the delta between is like kind of symmetrical, right? The delta between getting a non-Pipeline Builder, Buildpack stack, whatever repository built with Pipeline Builder is about the same as getting a Pipeline Builder style repository built with the typical or the other model of the scripts. Like both have the same kind of like baked in assumptions, they're just in different directions.
Absolutely.
So I would not expect it to be trivial to sort of take like an existing Buildpack stack, build a repository and just slap a Pipeline Builder YAML, and it's not going to just. I assume it will not just work, and I would love to be proved wrong.
But like, I suspect it will work for build packs and for extensions because they're heavily tested. I suspect that for builders and stacks, it's going to be more of a challenge because I don't think that they've ever actually been driven yet. But I do know the support is in Pipeline Builder, and I think that the problem is that you're getting to here is that anybody who can do this already understands Jam, already understands the YAMLs, already understands Pipeline Builder. So, we're at this point where if you've got all of that knowledge, then of course it's easy to do whatever you want. We're not really talking about us, though. We're talking about how easy it is for anybody else to get this achieved.
Right. Like there's huge existing like tribal and externalized knowledge, and yeah, I agree. And that's why this has been a goal for many months, years, right? Is to try to like bring these things together. It's just, it's like really, really hard and a lot of time that we therefore wouldn't spend on other things for gain that is less tangible, right? Like it's sort of the return on investment is not the same as like, oh, let's, build this new feature in the Python build pack, or let's
internal tech debt, really.
Yeah. It's pure tech debt. Like it does have some like impact to other developers, and like obviously one of our community goals as a community is to facilitate developers like jumping in and making their own build packs, stacks, builders, extending or modifying existing ones. Like Jericho, this is pretty much exactly like your use case right now, right? Like you're trying to like reason through this whole ecosystem and you're bumping up against what is effectively reverse Conway's law, right? Like this is why it is the way it is because there was 10 years ago, there was two teams in the Cloud Foundry Buildpacks world, and everything just kind of came out of that. And like, that's the world that we have to like live in today. But yeah, I have not tried to put a Pipeline Builder config file in a repo that has not, that isn't already built with Pipeline Builder. But my assumption is that it's going to be a pretty non-trivial delta. If that turns out to be wrong, I would love to know that, because that would like definitely change. At least, at the very least, it would inform sort of how we think about these like refactoring of commonizing CI. Like one of my ultimate goals, right, is as a tooling maintainer, I think it is a waste of non-tooling maintainers' time to manage CI, right? Like I don't think it makes any sense for the Java Buildpacks team to spend some proportion of their time maintaining Pipeline Builder. That's just stupid, right? The Java maintainers are experts in Java. They shouldn't have to also just sit there and like build pipelines when we have a whole separate team called tooling maintainers who have like self-selected into doing this. Like, so that's kind of one of my primary drivers and motivations. But I'm also like, I don't have infinite time. I'm not on a sabbatical. I can't just like sit here for 9 months and crank everything out. So if
I will do that for you. I will go off. I'll run that on different types of projects, and I'll let you know the results via Slack.
Yeah,
because if for no reason other than I need to test the changes I've made to Pipeline Builder to prove that they work for different environments, I can test them on projects that already exist then, and that'll be great. So I'll definitely do that, and I'll give you a summary of what it took to flip each one of them over.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point. It's like if we're working with any of these projects, communicating this feedback and kind of like helping things get better, that's why we're here. So I like it.
Okay. This is the most extensive notes section that I've seen in a long time. So thank you very much, Rob. All right. One last check. I'm almost afraid to do it.
Going on mute. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you all. This is really productive.
Indeed. Thanks very much, everyone. Take care. See you next one.
Yeah.
See you.